Awesome. Welcome everybody to our next live learning session. I think this is live learning 19 or something similar. So what's really exciting is the hours of conversation that we've had the privilege of hosting. I'd say we do this for the benefit of the system, but I also think for Jen and I and for the team, these are just really fun conversations for us to have. So I feel like this process is like a selfish agenda for us to speak to people that we really admire and respect and have really fun conversations. To kick us off today, I just want to take some time to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we live, work, play, learn, and create. And I would really love it if you would take a second and drop into the chat which lands you're coming to us from. So where in the world are you joining us today? And just introduce yourself and introduce what land you're joining us from. Future Anything is headquartered in Anglican in Brisbane. So typically for us, that's Yagara and Turrbal land. But I'm actually on the lands of the Palawa people in Hobart today. So it's my joy to be living on these lands at the moment, delivering a program with a bunch of really excited young people who are looking at taking cool ideas and transforming them into interesting things. So please let us know where you are. Feel free to pop mute on the conversation for the moment. And we will make sure that you get an opportunity to jump in as well. Typically how our live learning sessions roll is that we will get our wonderful speakers to introduce themselves in a moment, because one of my greatest fears in life is a bio read. I feel like it's like when somebody sings happy birthday to you, I just never quite know where to look when somebody's singing. So rather than me do a bio read, I'm going to allow these leaders to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about who they are. We're then going to unravel a little bit further some of the ways that they're maybe pushing at the status quo in education within the schools that they're leading. And then we're going to unwrap the onion as far as what that looks like. Throughout the process, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. We try to hold the last 15 minutes or so for questions. So we'd love for you to either hold your questions so that you can jump in and, be brave and, turn your mic off and put your video on and ask the question live. That would be great. Or feel free to drop those questions into the chat, and then we can make sure that we get to them at the end as we're moving through as well. So we have two really amazing leaders joining us today. Unfortunately, Stella can't join us. She's had some last-minute technical issues that have hampered her ability to jump into this session. But we will just take the lead of really hammering Trudi and Chrissie with double the amount of questions so that they can feel the heat today. I'm really excited for both of these leaders because they're two people that I've had the privilege of working alongside. And if I look at leaders within schools that I feel inspired by personally, these are two people that definitely sit on that list for me. Chrissie, I'm going to get you to start in a moment, but it would be remiss for me not to acknowledge that you were one of my first HODs when I was just a small beginning teacher back in the day. And what I think is really interesting, as an English HOD, I remember just being in awe of the way that you led the department, and certainly continue to be so awed as you move through in leadership in schools. And I know I've said this a couple of times before, but for me personally, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now without your leadership. I think early in my career, sort of paving the way for the kind of educator that I wanted to be. For those in the room that aren't familiar with you and your career, can you walk us through your career in education? And in doing so, I'd love to know, who were you as a learner before you were a teacher? What were you like when you were a student at school? And tell me about who you were as a learner, and then walk me through who you are now as a leader.
Wow, I didn't know that question was coming. Now I'm going to be my nerdy self. I didn't love school. I didn't hate school, but I loved learning. And I had an amazing English teacher, and I had an amazing drama teacher. And I was one of those kids that really didn't know what I wanted to do when it got to year 12. And it was my drama teacher that said to me, "Do you know what, Chrissie, I think you'd be a great teacher." And that was all it took. And I had the absolute privilege of about 10 years ago, we happened to be in the same room together. And I said to her, hey, this is where I'm at now, and it's thanks to you. And I know that lots of us as educators have that person, but I love that she saw something in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself. And I've taken that through my teaching journey and my learning journey. If you spoke to my math teacher, he would say I was a terrible student because all I did was draw dresses in my maths book. Ironically, last year I had to teach year 10 maths due to the teacher shortage. And I thought, man, if he could see me now. So as a learner, I loved learning, but not a big lover of school. Where I've been in my journey, I've worked for the Department of Education for 34 years. And that just seems so ironic, given that now I'm guiding young people into their first of many, many, many careers. So sometimes I feel a little bit duplicitous in that. I've worked as a teacher, I've worked as a head of department, I've worked as a deputy principal and now principal. I've also done stints in regional office. I was one of the people that led Flying Start when Year 7 came into secondary. Greatest PD I ever did, because I got to see 53 different high schools and how they did learning and teaching. My decision to become a principal was a really arrogant one and quite misguided. I just thought I could do the job better than the predecessors that I'd had. How arrogant is that? And there have been days where I've thought, geez, Chrissie, you really got that wrong. Because I think in hindsight, they were great leaders and they made parts of it look effortless, which I now know are not effortless. I've had the privilege of being in schools that have been very well resourced and big schools and popular schools. I've had the privilege of being the deputy principal at the school where my own 3 kids went to. So I've experienced education through the eyes of a parent, and that was an absolute game changer for me. Why be a principal other than being an incredibly arrogant human? And why come to a school that had suffered some systemic neglect? Effectively, it's my local school. And it's a school that was doing an amazing job without being recognised. And it's a school that I arrived at the same time as COVID, and they placed an enormous amount of trust in me. And the reason why we're doing things differently, it's not about me as the principal. It's about a team who are willing to say, you know what? The education system as it stood for hundreds and 1,000 years, if we go back to ancient Roman and Greek times, actually doesn't service the needs of our kids today. So the reason why I can be a principal in an environment that constantly asks what if is because I've got great people working with me. And I try to give those people permission. My mantra is it's vogue to go rogue. And go rogue we shall, but you can only do that when you've got great people in the team.
Awesome. Thanks, Chrissie. Trudi, let's throw over to you.
Hi, Nick. Sorry, love.
Thanks for joining us. So don't be sorry yet. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your career. And look, it's been a real joy, obviously, to be doing some deep work with Flinders at the moment. Working with your teachers and working with your students around some of the ways that you're doing it differently. But I'm going to throw the same question at you as I did at Chrissie. What were you like as a learner? And tell me about your journey to be a leader.
That's always an interesting question, isn't it? So I may not be doing myself any favours in responding to that. I think I was a little opposite to Chrissie. I loved school because of the social side of school. Learning sort of happened because it had to happen. But it was the social side and the connections, I think, that really drove me. And, you know, some of my besties from high school remain my besties now. So that was really important for me. What I did know about school, I remember back in the days when I was at school, we did work experience in about grade 11. And I went as a teacher because in a primary school. And I remember doing that because my neighbour was a teacher and she was awesome. You know, it's always that inspiring teacher that you had. But she was someone that was really pivotal in my life and drove me to think, you know, this is something that does make a difference. She was doing that, and she cared deeply for children, but also cared deeply not just for them in that moment, but for where they may be in the future. And that was something that always intrigued me. So was I a perfect student? No. I've got now a colleague who taught me at school. And I went back to work at the school I was at as a student, and I thought, oh, she's going to hate me, but she welcomed me back with open arms, admitted that I was naughty, and the school still had records, but I wasn't too bad. It's why I don't mind those little friends here in primary schools who, you know, who like some of the challenges sometimes. So learning was second, friendships were first, and the social. I became a teacher because of the influence from someone really influential in my life. And how did I end up a head of a primary school? I was in curriculum leadership for 20 years, and I love that. I think that's probably one of the most critical middle leadership roles, where you are so in contact with the people on the ground each and every day, doing the important work of inspiring them. One of my mantras is schools must be as much about learning for the teachers as it is for the students. So that ability to really connect people together with that purpose of making not just children of good minds, but also of really good hearts. And I think that's what drives me and has lent me into some of the initiatives we've taken here. I worked at independent schools for most of my working career, both all boys, then all girls, and now at a co-ed school. And one of my mantras is always choose your boss. So I've been really, really fortunate at a number of my schools to have leaders who embrace innovation, but not for innovation's sake, but for deeper, better learning sake. And that's why I found myself here at Flinders. I knew that Stuart Mead, the principal, is highly committed to doing things very well, but deeply, and with an integrity that we build students of good character and of good mind. So that gets me out of bed each and every day.
Excellent. So, Chrissie, I'm going to take a phrase that you used and throw this question back to both of you, because I think it's actually a really nice catalyst for the conversation that we're having. You said that in your work, sometimes innovation is, I think, about asking the right what if question. What if we? And I'd love to know, what is the what if question that is defining the work that you're doing in your school at the moment? And then what are some of the answers to that what if question that you're playing with at Coops?
It's been around, what if we completely de-implemented, and that's the term I use with my staff, everything that we do? Because not every person is succeeding at school. So we get out of bed every morning for student success. What if we created a school where every student is successful? So we've changed the language. And so traditionally, middle leadership in our system, they're called heads of department. Well, heads of department could work for the police, they could work in health. What if we called you what you actually do? So our heads of department are student success team leaders. So they teach, they learn with the kids, with the focus on success for all the kids. So what if we create a school where every young person walks through the gate? And my school's not big. I've got 457 students. I know them by name. I know their stories. The first what if we started with was, what if we take the time in our school week to align ourselves to the Australian Professional Standard number 1, know the learner? How would we facilitate that? And then it was my very brave timetabling deputy said, what if we ran 4-day face-to-face and a very flexible 5th day? And I said, do I need to get the defibrillator for you, because you're going to be the one responsible for that? And she said, no, I think I can do it. So those brave people I was talking about. And then my student success team leaders, I said, what if you wrote your role description and you gave it to me? And Nick, you and I would be familiar with a fabulous educator, Steve Lang. And he did that many, many years ago. And that really stuck in my head. So I put that to my team and I got 2 amazing role descriptions. And I said to those 2 people, well, what if I give you the jobs? You've written these amazing descriptions. I think it would impact, and they're not curriculum specific. They're not siloed. And they said yes. So the what ifs, you just have to keep them coming. And sure, there are people going to say, what if we fail? And there is a great, I know, Nick, that you're an advocate of James Clear and Atomic Habits. And there's this brilliant quote and it sits on my desk. Is it all right if I share it? And he says, one of the great balancing acts in life is to be cautious and daring at the same time. Cautious enough to avoid stupid mistakes, prevent burnout, and maintain a margin of safety. Daring enough to bet on yourself to do the things you would regret leaving undone, and to be willing to be uncomfortable in the short term so you can learn and grow in the long term. So our mantra when we worked through COVID, and we've kept it, is that we will hasten slowly, we'll embrace the mess. This is messy work. So as we de-implement things, as we ask the what if questions, we've also got to be prepared that it's not clean. And some days you really need a mop and bucket. Some days you need the full kit, the bleach, the mop, the bucket, all the things. I haven't had to clean up any crime scenes, by the way. It's just what it feels like. So the work is hard work. It's messy work, but you can't be deterred when at the first what if it all goes kaput. So the fact that I had such a compelling argument, we looked at our attendance rates and all of those things that are important systemically and important to us too. But my argument has been, do we need kids with us to attend and be disengaged while they're here? What if they're engaged but not here? And the best way to start that is with a one-day model.
Yes.
So that's where we started. The what ifs still come hard and fast. But I had a sense, I have sense of progress meetings as opposed to line management meetings with my leaders. And at the moment, their sense of progress is really strong because our attendance has improved, our academic results have improved, and that's great. Don't get me wrong. What if the well-being and engagement of our kids is attended to first, and that comes second? So we've created a place in our college called The Place, and it has a very simple premise. Remove any barrier that is stopping a young person from engaging and learning. So we have a full-time teacher in that space. We have a youth support worker, and it could be as simple as providing lunch, a backpack, a laptop. They're very pragmatic, simple things. But for some of our kids, it's around managing the anxieties. And we know that the mental health of our young people, it's a growth industry in itself, and they can't access the support that they need. So what if we offer it at school? What if we lower the cortisol levels of all our kids and then do the learning and teaching part? So our wellbeing team, as a student success team, sit alongside and through our traditional curriculum areas. So it's about taking those risks, and we celebrate them, and we celebrate them hard, and we celebrate them with our parents, with our kids, with our staff, and with the system as well. So that James Clear quote sits really strongly with me, because you're going to have the days where the what ifs work, and you're going to have the days where they don't. And it's about that decision making and making sure that you have a team around you, and not just education people. My coach, Kate Pearden from Zenith, outside of education. So you're getting that other perspective. The project, one of the project leaders with us works, he's a freelancer. He worked in correcting the payroll system in Queensland Health. So it's about getting those external sources. And then, of course, building your private sort of tribe around you and making sure that they're all different to you. so that you can ask of them those what if questions and sort of test the waters first.
Okay, I have 1,000 questions. I'll start with one. For everybody listening who piqued their interest upon the words that you said, a 4-day week, I know that there's a whole bunch of people in the room that are like, say more on how this functions. Can you explain how that works? How does it work practically for students? How does it work practically for teachers? What does it look like? Because I think what I love in the way that you framed that is we had this world pre-COVID where students needed to be on site 5 days a week to do all of their classes. And then this pandemic hit and suddenly we were thrown into this world where suddenly students were learning virtually. And then it's almost like the elastic band has just relaxed back to exactly what we were doing before. And in some ways, we haven't taken the best of some of that learning from the pandemic and fused it with some of the existing practices that we had. And it sounds like that some of the work that you're doing at the moment is taking the learnings of what worked for your young people during that experience and fusing it with what young people might need on the ground in person. So what's the practical application of that knowledge on the ground for you?
Okay, so it's around having a look. We had to look at first, we started with the Teachers Award. What did it say we could and couldn't do? Because many, many years ago, Nick, as you know, had education change makers come in and work with me in 2 schools. And one of the big takeaways there was know the system better than the system knows the system. So I spent a lot of time just entrenched in the Education Act General Provisions 2006. I spent a lot of time in the award. I spent a lot of time in union documents and found out.
Sounds like really fun reading, Chrissie.
Oh,
like I feel really lit up by these documents that you're listing.
I know. It was worth it though, because the end goal was when I was challenged with questions around, or someone said to me, well, you can't do that. My response was, well, actually, I can, and here's how I can. So take, for example, the Teachers Award. Nowhere does it say a teacher has to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 3. There are rostered duty hours, but you can push beyond that. We were given permission during COVID to come up with flexible working arrangements, and those still exist within the system. There was a promotion last year from the Department of Education, start the conversation around that flexible work arrangement. So you have to know what are the actual boundaries versus what are the perceived boundaries. So the QCAA, who set sort of the number of hours and so forth that we need to do programs, that amazing deputy that I was talking about, she realised that we could do it Monday to Thursday, same start time. We start at 8:50, we finish at 2:50, but instead of running 4 lessons a day, we run 5. And so instead of being 70-minute lessons, they're 60-minute lessons. Now, a really interesting byproduct of that is that we've had much fewer behaviour referrals with the shorter lessons. So there's an unexpected outcome for Monday to Thursday. And our teachers still get their 210 minutes of prep and correction Monday to Thursday. Fridays we call a student focus day. And we don't call our student free days at the start of the year student free, they're student focus. What are we here for gathered as educators? We're here around our kids. So what's happened is, yes, is there additional pressure on my teachers to add an extra lesson to each day? Absolutely there is. Some are coping with that really well. Some are challenged by that, but we're looking at, well, what is the actual challenge there? For the Friday, our system, the Department of Education in Queensland, has 3 key drivers from equity and excellence. They are educational achievement, engagement and wellbeing, culture and inclusion. So on Fridays, all we've done is use the resources that are available to us. So my senior students on a Friday have options because we've individualised each of their pathways. So they either go to uni, they do their apprenticeship, their traineeship, they go to work experience, they're doing cert courses, or they're doing online tutorials or something similar. Because we use Teams for our learning and teaching during the week, they can catch up at their own pace on Friday. So they have access to an educational program on Friday. Whether or not they access that is their determination as a senior student. There's that element of trust coming in there. For our younger students, I'll give you a classic example. We have a significant number of people here who have a diagnosis of anxiety. So we've negotiated with their mental health team that Friday is their pressure release day. So face-to-face Monday to Thursday, Friday is their catch-up day. If their parents want to supervise them on a Friday, they do. If they need to be supervised here, or they want to do one of those 3 workshops that align to the 3 key drivers, they can. For my teachers, it means that twice a term, they supervise on a Friday. 8 Fridays of the term, their student success team leader negotiates with them what it is they need to do to focus on their students. So at the moment, my teachers are working with Joanne McKecken's team from the Learner First. Isn't that an awesome name? The Learner First. So if you're talking about student success, put your learner first. At the moment, my teachers need to be here on a Friday morning for that face-to-face contact. Then they can go home and they would have that opportunity to work from home. Some of my teachers, if they're not required in, they've said, Chrissie, can I work from 7 a.m. in the morning? Well, of course you can, because the nature of some people is that they work better in the morning. So it's a 4-day face-to-face week. We have a 5th day, but there's choice and voice around it. Choice and voice for kids, for parents, for teachers, for support staff, and for the leadership team. So the impact on wellbeing and work-life balance, which we know at a time when we are in an absolute teacher shortage crisis, I've gone from getting no people wanting to transfer into Coops to I get resumes every single day, and I don't have to teach Year 10 maths anymore. Thank goodness. And I'm happy to share those structural, the way that we do it, what I learned about the award, what I learned about the departmental and union agreements and those sorts of things, because it is very dry reading, and it's about 4 weeks of your life you'll never get back, but it's worth it.
Awesome. All right. So everyone is going to nerd out on some policy reading this weekend. I know everyone's excited about that. Frankly, I can't wait. I'm thrilled to get into this. So whilst we pause our excitement over policy documents, Trudi, I'm going to throw to you. I know it's going to be tough to follow that act, because
Really
who doesn't want to nerd out on policy documents? But what I love about the Flinders story and some of the work that you're leading is obviously the place that we play for Future Anything is very much around curriculum innovation. We work with lots of schools around how we can future-proof learning so that we put the student at the centre, so that there's this deep real-world connection, and so that young people can see the purpose for their learning. Because I believe that when young people can understand why they're learning something, that's where you get engagement. Whether they like the content or not, you know, that sense of purpose builds engagement. And so in the work that we do, we see lots of really innovative approaches to different programs. And maybe one of the challenges that I see in the sector at the moment, whether we're pushing STEM, whether we're pushing entrepreneurship, whether we're pushing whatever flavor is the current kind of thing that everyone's excited about, is that this curriculum or these opportunities often exist as these bolt-on programs for the fortunate few. They're kind of sitting within a siloed subject, or it's a co-curricular activity, but it's basically an opt-in process. And so I think what we get is this sense within the system that you can't do anything progressive with curriculum in core subjects, and that, you know, real innovation or real curriculum innovation happens in this bolt-on space. And what I love about the work that you're leading at Flinders is this is sitting within core curriculum, within a primary space, and not just upper primary. You've got your little preppies getting involved in this as well. And so can you talk to me a little bit about some of the work that you're leading at Flinders, and also speaking into what was the what if question that you asked and your team asked in the development of this at the same time?
Oh, thanks, Nick. And thank you for that. That's lovely. I think you've summed up a little of the why we do what we do. I don't know if mine was a what if question or whether it was a why not. question. So I probably need some time to think that through. But what I knew was that our curriculum was becoming more and more jam-packed. We were pushing new ills of society into our curriculum. We've got civics and citizenship, we've got this, and it just was bursting at the seams. And I know that a number of schools, and I believe nearly every school with great intent, looks for a methodology that enables both depth but also to tick off the compliance things. And I never saw it as a set, like a jigsaw. I saw it more as a continuum of how do we go about really, I think, number one, honouring our children's sense of innate desire to do good. I honestly believe these little people have an innate desire to do good in the world and really wanted to leverage that. I also think that social emotional learning needs to sit right at the core of what we do. If we don't speak to the heart, then we don't have engagement. If we don't speak to their ability to problem solve really, really creatively, we build that out of them, we don't build it into them, then we have to question what methodology and why we're doing it. The curriculum's handed to us. It's not handed to us how we have to go about that. And we are committed to deep curriculum. One of the why nots or what ifs for me, more the what if, was what if we can still really honour numeracy and literacy as a core essential to the depths of what we can do in a primary school, ensuring that gives kids wings. They then can use their little working memory. There's not cognitive overload to really apply that. So that sort of drove some of our thinking initially. And what if we could find a methodology that it both respected their desire to make a difference, enabled them to genuinely make a difference and develop agency, that hooked in the social emotional learning, not as a tag on, but really bolted it in that you couldn't solve this problem without engaging emotionally within it and pulling on some social emotional skills. And what if we did that in a way that those skills, and I hate this term, but I find myself using it more and more, future-proofed them, that whether they're doing it within the context of the curriculum or whether they're doing it outside or whether they pull on it when they're 25 buying a house or whether they're using it to come up with a solution about what they're going to do in the future. So we did quite a lot of work, and I was really interested when it first came out of Rothman School of Design, that whole notion of design thinking, and then built in the human-centered design thinking. And so we just had a conversation here with my head deputy curriculum and said, what if we pulled all those things together and created real problems for these kids to solve? Now, are they all student generated? No, because we do have the curriculum, but are they gaining a great sense of voice? So we created this sort of integrated curriculum across humanities, science, technology. English is really driving that now, thanks to your work, Nick. But to be able to give them provocations and problems for them to actually solve. So we've called the program I Care in Prep to Year 2, honouring the prep in Year 1, honouring their age. So we want them to go beyond themselves. You start with empathising, and there's a whole lot of social emotional skills that sit off that, which is really fascinating, I think. So we use human-centered design thinking to provide problems in their little world when they're prep in Year 1, so the school context, home context. And then by Year 2 to Year 6, we have I impact, because we're wanting them to impact the world in really positive ways. We've said doing well academically, we are an academically focused school, doing well by doing good in the world. So we've created this I impact program, and as an example, our Year 3s have taken on the role as designers and engineers, looking, and it's a new unit that's just in play at the moment, looking at Alex Headland and the foreshore there, but they've had a whole lot of people coming in to talk to them around diversity and needs. So we've had mums with prams, we've had some Olympians from the Paralympics that have talked about their disabilities and what they need, and then they're going to reimagine the Alex foreshore and the surf club and everything around there, so it is accessible to all. So, you know, we've got the science integrated in there, there's the geography, everything's sitting in there, but they've got a real purpose for it. You know, the Year 6s do soul as a solution, and they look at people, so, you know, minority groups of homeless people, people with needs. They're looking at a whole range of different people, and they use solar to create solutions to their problems. One of our little guys went rogue on us. I love that line, Chrissie, and said, well, my uncle's a farmer and the rats keep eating all of his stored grain, I want to come up using solar with a solution to that. It's like, knock your socks off, buddy. That is awesome. So we've really tried to both honor them, ensure their engagement, and we have some really great feedback that that's working. It also addresses the issue for teachers too about this siloed curriculum. We teach this bit, we teach that bit, and to really go deep from that surface deep application level, if you don't give them problems to solve, we buy into that very sad situation where it's all about content, you know, chew, view, and spew it back out, really, isn't it? With a lot of assessment, for want of a better word. But I do think that to go deep, the integration with a really futures focused human-centered design thinking. My next thing is leaning into that integrative thinking. I think that built in with it's going to be really, really helpful too. Well, that's us at the moment.
My favourite story from Flinders is the story of the preppies. And was it Justin who walked into the door and was like, where are you guys all going? And the student's like, we're going to find empathy. And they were like walking out the door going to find empathy. And I just think that's like the cutest thing in the world, that you've got these like tiny humans that are just zooming out to look at the world around them. And I think using the curriculum as a provocation for that exploration. You know, there's so much to be gained from, I think, really harnessing that innate curiosity that young people have. And so much of our system constrains their thinking, when actually what we really want to be doing is cracking it open, you know, and building that sense of questioning and that sense of wonder and that sense of curiosity about not only themselves, but also the world around them. And I think, you know, good curriculum does that. A young person walks out the other side and they know a little bit more about who they are and a little bit more about the world that they live in. And I think if we can get curriculum to a place where it does that, then I think that's kind of where we're on the money. I want to stay with you for a second, Trudi. Go.
Sorry. The content's important, but front loading all the time. If they're asking the right questions through the design thinking process, they are motivated to seek the knowledge because they can't solve the problem without it. You know, has it been a huge learning journey? Absolutely, because teachers love lineal. We'll start here, then we'll do this, when we'll do this. Principals love lineal. We'll do this, and then we'll do this. And design thinking is really all over the shop. You know, we've done a lot of work designing a model that's visual for our kids in the class so that they know it's not in a straight line, because once you get to ideate and it's not working, back you go, my friend, and have you actually met the needs of the learner? As we centralize empathy for that. And if they're not meeting the needs of the learner, we're like, boom, next, back you go. You know, so I think that's really, really important for them.
I want to stay with you, and I'm going to throw this question to Chrissie in a second, because I think, Chrissie, you mentioned this before we kind of went live with everyone in the room, that like sometimes innovation and being brave and being bold can be quite a lonely journey. And I think also through that, stretching at the corners of what we know is possible, you learn a lot through that process. And so, Trudi, I want to, like, because obviously, you know, Flinders has been on this I care and I impact journey now for a few years. What have you learned through that process, and what have your staff learned? And if you could go back and restart the journey again, is there anything that you would do differently, or is there any part of the journey that you would hold to be most critically important? I think because there's so many stakeholders involved in doing education differently. You've got to bring your teachers along for the journey, and you've also got to bring your community along for the journey. And then somehow you still have to keep students at the center of everything that you're doing at the same time. So thinking about those stakeholders, thinking about the journey up until now, what have you learned? And is there anything that you do differently if you went back to the beginning as well?
Heaps. Yeah. What I think the biggest takeaway, and I've always believed this, if teachers and parents see children thriving in their learning, everyone is more engaged with it. Everyone is more trusting of it. We certainly rolled it out as a bit of a trial to start with. You put a trial in front of things and people are really forgiving of trials, I've found. Really forgiving. So when you put trial in front of it, and then you know, you choose your early adopters, you do, you know, all the basic leadership stuff, you choose that. What we've become acutely aware of is when children are highly engaged, they're highly productive. When they're highly productive, the learning is is that teachers aren't driving the learning, the children are driving the learning. They're wanting to know, they're wanting to improve. You know, you hear all the time, favorite subject, I impact, because they're feeling really strong, you know, strongly connected to the issue. What would I have done differently? We really went into this with a mindset of fail forward, but fail fast. Doesn't matter if we get it wrong, we don't get it wrong twice, but we learn from it, and how do we keep building into that? And I think it was also a situation where our parents trusted the process. We'd let them know what was going on. We have showcases often for parents to come in, and our teachers, interestingly, often want to showcase the I impact. They're also hearing of it around the dinner table a lot, you know. So we let the children be the messages going home around the engagement, and we sat in the back end. You know, we communicate with our parents each week about what we're learning, so that there is the real integrity around curriculum and pedagogy. I think if I had my time again, I would have immersed teachers in more design sprints, so they themselves were learners in a really new methodology before teaching it. And I think that would have broken the teachers that had an idea early on, so much better at it now of what the kids would design or produce. Now they're going off in a whole range of different directions. And I think you really have to be experiencing human-centered design thinking yourselves. We've used it to, you know, the methodology to review our assessment practices here. That was really powerful. But I would have put more time into having teachers be learners in that realm, so that they could empathize with the children when they're in those stuck moments. That would have been my big learning. I wouldn't have gone any slower, though. I think sometimes you've got to rip the bandage off when there's innovation and go for it. Figure out what happens, you know, and mop up, as you were saying earlier, Chrissie, mop up those days where you're mopping up a whole lot. But for us too, I think one of the benefits for teachers was we were taking what was, you know, ideally 4 subjects and putting them into one. So you've almost cut by, you know, a quarter the amount of planning teachers have to do, the amount of assessment teachers have to do. And that can only be a good thing. Awesome for the learners, fabulous for the teachers. Yeah, it feels like a win-win there.
I really love that. I think I have this phrase that I use with teachers that we work with, which is parents of happy kids don't complain. And I think because it's true, like if your young person has agency and ownership over their learning, if they're thriving and if they're happy, there's no reason for a parent to complain, because ultimately parents who are complaining, it actually comes from this fear deep down that their young person isn't okay. And so they're trying to advocate on behalf. And sometimes that worry comes across as anger, but really underneath it all is just this sense of concern for their young person and how they're traveling. So that communication with stakeholders, I think, and the showcase element as an ability to really bring the community in is such a critical vehicle for that. Feel free, team, we've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask Chrissie the same question, but if you've got any questions that you want to drop into the chat, feel free to drop those in now, and I'll get Chrissie and Trudi to answer those in some sort of speed answers. But Chrissie, I'll throw to you as well, like thinking about the journey that you've been on with Coops, what have been some of the key learnings that have come out of that? Is there anything that you do differently? How do you support the community with this change initiative?
My answer is going to sound really arrogant, Nick. Is there anything I would have done differently? No, because some of these things you just can't predict, and you have to be prepared to go with the flow. As a teacher, as a HOD, as a deputy, I was constantly in trouble for pushing boundaries, doing all of that. And I just think, well, that's their problem. This is what I'm going to do. And Nick, you've seen me in full flight on that. When I became a principal, I suddenly went, I'm a little more risk adverse than I used to be, because there's such a big accountability. Yep. If everything goes right and well, yay, principal's doing a great job. If everything goes down the other end, that principal, I don't know about her. She's coming to the school and she's new and all of those things. So I think you've got to be prepared to risk it and know that no doesn't satisfy anyone's need. Yes does. So if you can back your people, your parents, your kids, your staff by saying yes, then do it. So probably what I had to change or tweak was my mindset around the risk management aspect of things, and to really stay true to, I've worked for 34 years in a system in so many roles, and I trust that over that time I have built up a literal library, an amazing tribe of support, agitate, disagreement, agreement, and a preparedness to trust my own professional wisdom and knowledge. The best example of that is assessment. Through our discussions, my student success team had this moment where they said, so everything counts, Chrissie. We have learning achievement standards, which we lock into formative and summative assessment. What happens if we don't do formative and summative assessment and we have the learning achievement standards there and we look for evidence in every single lesson? We're still using the system's learning achievement standards, but we're saying, you know what, that conversation I had with my student as they were lining up and they told me all about what they'd read last night about the feudal system, that counts. That moment where the child says, I can't do this, and I got that as a year 10 maths teacher quite a lot, come back and say, all right, for what reason do you need to do this? So everything counts. So I know that my answer sounds incredibly arrogant, but if I can't trust my own decision making 34 years in, when can I? Now, I have had a look at if I can survive working at Bunnings as opposed to being a leader. That's my risk management. I'm an empty nest now, so yes, I can.
And look, a sausage every Saturday, like you're sorted,
Hey.
like between the Bunnings. I know there's some avid gardening in your house, so I'm sure that the Bunnings discount would be well utilised. So I feel like, you know, there are some wins in this scenario as well.
Absolutely.
I've just got a question in the chat, and then I'm giving you a second to think about. My final question is going to be if you could, and obviously, Chrissie, you've referenced one book that I think is a really great one to read. But the question I'm going to ask you to finish with, and I'm giving you some lead time, is there somewhere that you would push teachers to read, listen, engage, tap into, whether it's a book, a podcast, a resource, policy documents? People, like, where would you stretch people to if they want to build some, I guess, confidence in kind of stretching themselves in the innovation space? And whilst you ponder that final question, I've just got a question in the chat, Chrissie, which is kind of being thrown your way. And the question is, I'm interested to hear how parents reacted to the flexible work week. Did this increase your engagement with student co-curricular training or activities? So did this release result in more of that? And how was the parent engagement, I guess, around it when it was introduced?
So it went viral. My parents took it to social media big time. And what was interesting, we'd included parents we did a bit of a white paper around it, and we'd included them in the research, the readings, surveys, feedback, and those sorts of things. And then it went viral on social media, which was interesting and both worked in our favour and didn't work in our favour. If I can quote Brené Brown, people. We're dealing with people. I hate emails. So it's around, come in, have a coffee, have a chat. What's the issue? So any parent who was concerned came in, had a chat, had a coffee, and we worked towards a shared why. So I think information. And one of those parents is now the greatest advocate for it. But if you've only got two parents resisting a significant change, that speaks volumes, I think. And it has increased our student co-curricular, all of those things. I've got Brisbane Bullets coming in tomorrow to run some programs with the kids. We're doing Take Action for Kindness, supporting Alison Baden Clay. We've got, it's endless. And what's beautiful about the endless nature of it is the kids are determining what some of this is and what some of it isn't. And the parents' number one request was, can you teach my kids about finance? Sure can. So we've had all the finance people come in. You know, it only can open up opportunities, but always, if someone is not working with you, bring them into the room. I'm sitting at a kitchen table. I don't have a desk. I believe everyone deserves a seat at the table. Bring them in, make the coffee, have the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Chrissie. All right, Trudi, what's your hot tip, your read, your podcast, your resource? Where would you send an educator who's interested to tap into this thinking a little bit more?
It's a roundabout answer in that I think it's more about leadership, and I'm leaning into some things Chrissie said there. You do have to back yourself, but I think there's a way in which you can bring people in whilst also ensuring that there's some non-negotiables around that. So certainly for me, the ferocious warmth, I think from a leadership point of view, you'll see yourself in some of each of the domains and then be able to say, okay, this is where this is where I stand on this. This is what we are going to stand for. But how do we bring people around? That was really pivotal for me. I think it's great. And back to where, learning is at the heart of all we do. I think if we don't really love to ensure that we want our children to learn, we can become really taken by, shiny new fads, and people become very, very fad, resistant after a while because it's hard. And I think, like I said at the beginning, it's not about innovation, it's about deeper, better learning. And so I always go back to Michael Fullan's professional capital. That really held me to go, what are those critical learning instructional paths? They don't have to be subject-based. They don't have to be subject-based. They don't have to be content knowledge only. So those were really pivotal for me. But a bit like you, Chrissie, you do need to have done enough deep thinking about what you truly believe in and is important to be able to say, this is a train, we're going forward, please jump on and let's do this wholeheartedly, and with a spirit of ourselves enterprise. We can do this differently, we can do this better. And to be able to balance, what the community that you choose to serve. No one in our college is here because they've been transferred to have to. They choose to serve this community. So when we're choosing to serve this community, what are we actually doing that's going to take them from, good to better to best? Let's not aim for mediocrity. Let's aim to be pretty exceptional for our kids. That's a big driver for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Trudi. Chrissie, I know you've dropped James Clear into the conversation. Any other hot reads or listens?
I was looking over at my bookcase actually while you were saying that, and I thought, what would be the first two that I'd gather? I like to go in and out of education. So from an educational perspective, How to Create a Culture of Achievement by Fisher, Fry and Pumpkin has been a game changer for me. It's around structure, it's around purpose, it's around how to achieve your why. So sitting in a very safe educational space there. Outside of education, Wolfpack has been a really good outside looking in and building your tribe, building your team. And I really love the analogies that she uses there. They're very palpable. Teachers can connect to it, even though it's not about education. Podcast, a game changer for me was one with Maddie from EC and Joanne McKecken. I can't remember the name of the podcast, but I remember listening to it cleaning the house and going, yes, that's it. That's where I need to divert my attention. And then behind me is a poster that a Nick Dyson gave me about 10 years ago now that just says dream. What do we want our kids to do? Dream. Parents, dream. Staff, dream. Dreaming has no limits, and it takes you to places that you just don't know where you might end up. So that's there for a reason. That's my daily reminder.
Awesome.
I think that's probably the place for us to close, everybody. And so firstly, thank you so much, Trudi and Chrissie, for sharing a little bit of your journey and also a little bit of your current stories at your schools. There was so much to draw from the wealth of experience that you've offered the sector and your young people. So thank you for your generosity of your time and also your stories. And I think for everyone in the room, like I want to finish with maybe where Chrissie finished us off, maybe ask, what's your what if question? What is something, what can you, encourage or dream towards? And what's this what if question that you can uncover and unravel, and maybe carry into tomorrow and see the possibility of that? So thank you so much for your time today. And I hope that you've taken something from today's conversation. And we look forward to the next live learning session next month. So thank you very much.